Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Episode 10, Engineering and Control. How to Speak and Program the Universe. Book 4, The Foundry Floor. Part 4, The Global Safety Doctrine, the Universe's Unbreakable Law. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. We are in Book 4 of Episode 10, The Foundry Floor. In our previous part, the preface, we stood at the workshop door and understood the craftsman's mindset. Now we step onto the floor itself, where the great machines, the foundries, hum. But before we touch a single control, before we compile our first program into reality, we must learn the one law that governs this space. This part is about the Global Safety Doctrine. It's not a list of rules, it's the physics of responsibility. The anchor image here is the control room for a nuclear reactor. Not the popular image of panic and sirens, but the real one. A quiet, deeply calm space of colored lights, scrolling graphs, and procedures written in blood and physics. Every operator here knows one truth. You do not fight the core's nature. You guide it within its immutable limits. You listen to its coherent hum, and you know the precise sound that means run away. Our new skill is learning to hear that sound in the phi field, and knowing the exact pre-drilled procedure when we do. The scene. The quiet before the sequence. The control room is silent, but for the low hum of servers and the whisper of air conditioning. Before you is a panoramic console. Not with joysticks and big red buttons, but with banks of screens. On the left, a live phi map from the foundry chamber. A quantum optical lattice, perhaps, shows a calm, dark blue field, like still water at night. In the center, a schematic of the licensed window for today's experiment. Acceptable ranges for the intensity of change, coherence length, topological charge density. On the right, the rollback sequencer is armed and green-lit, linked to a verified stable phi state saved from 3 hours ago, before any systems were powered. Your hand rests not on a throttle, but on a coherence budget display. It shows a number, the available coherent phase space for this experiment, calculated from the stability thresholds of the medium and the constraint analysis of the grammar. It is your fuel, your limit, your covenant with physics. The question this part answers is the most serious one. How do we engineer when a single mistake could create not just a broken machine, but a broken pattern in the fabric of change itself? The Coherence Selection Principle, the universe's law of laws. Let's state the central law. It is simple, absolute, and already familiar to you from the grammar. It is the Coherence Selection Principle. Think of the universe not as a static stage, but as a continuous, unimaginably vast filtering process. At every moment, in every cubic nanometer of space, it is performing the test on every pattern of phi. The test has only two outcomes: constructive resonance, alignment, harmony. This is when the parts of a pattern are in phase. Their changes reinforce each other. A peak here lines up with a peak there. A flow here feeds a vortex there. The pattern makes sense within the local grammar. Result: persistence, stability, inheritance, amplification. The pattern is selected for. It sticks around. It becomes real, durable. A laser beam is this. A standing wave is this. A living cell is this. Destructive resonance, dissonance, conflict. This is when the parts are out of phase. They fight. A peak slams into a trough and cancels. A flow here tears at a vortex there. The pattern contradicts itself or the grammar around it. Result: decay, cancellation, fragmentation, annihilation. The pattern is selected against. It unravels. It turns to noise, to heat, to chaos. Static on a radio is this. A shattered glass is this. A seizure is this. This isn't a metaphor. It is the direct consequence of phi and its derivatives interacting. When waves align, their amplitudes add. When they oppose, they subtract. The universe is simply the endless sum of these additions and subtractions across the infinite tapestry. The stable structures we call things are the rare, beautiful summations that survive the filtering. So here is the point for the engineer. We do not get to choose the filter. We must design for it. Our creations must pass the universe's coherence test, or they will be erased, often violently. Engineering, therefore, is the art of designing for constructive resonance. Our refrain, whispered in this control room before every action, is this: if coherence breaks, we stop. If coherence returns, we continue. This is our heartbeat. The engineering trinity: budget, gate, and rollback. This principle translates into three operational pillars. They are not suggestions. They are the protocol for staying alive on the foundry floor. Pillar 1: the coherence budget. Before we issue a single command, we must answer: what can we afford? The coherence budget is not money. It is a physical resource, the available coherent phase space in the region we want to affect. Think of it as the cognitive load of that patch of reality. How many different, synchronized phi changes can it support before its internal relationships become confused, jumbled, unstable? We calculate this budget from two things: constraint analysis, what combinations of omega and k and higher derivatives are even allowed by the grammar in this medium. This defines the shape of possible coherent states, and stability thresholds, how much intensity of change the medium can support before its internal phase relationships decohere into noise. This intensity of change is what the classical world tallies as energy. It is the scorekeeper for activity, not a substance itself. On our console, it might be displayed as coherence capacity, 1.2 E5 plus or minus 2000 in change units, or spatial coherence length budget, 50 lambda plus or minus 2 lambda. Another critical display is the action tally, which tracks the cumulative intensity of change our experiment has induced from the baseline state. Our program's design must come with a predicted coherence cost. If the cost exceeds the budget, the program is physically impossible in this foundry at this time. The compiler will reject it. This is our first gate. We cannot wish for a complex, swirling vortex pattern in a tiny, noisy thermal system. The budget, derived from the medium's ability to maintain internal phase relationships, says no. Pillar 2: the coherence gate. After we act, we must measure. Did we succeed? The action is complete. The foundry has executed our compiled program. Now, our sensors flood the console with new data. We don't just look to see if it looks right. We run a specific automated check, the coherence gate. We measure the actual resulting phi field. We calculate key metrics: phase locking value. How aligned are the oscillations across the region? A direct measure of constructive resonance. Constraint residuals. Do the measured omega and k obey the dispersion relation? The time echo and space echo must be in grammatical agreement. Topological integrity. Do any defects have clean integer charges, or are they fuzzy fractional messes? A sign of topological incoherence. Spectral purity. Is the intensity of change focused in the derivative ranges we designed, or has it splattered incoherently across the spectrum? Each metric has a pass-fail threshold. For example, constraint residuals must be 0.9. The gate is not a judgment, it's a physical diagnostic. Pass means the pattern is coherent, stable, and likely to persist. It has passed the universe's filter. Fail means dissonance is present above tolerance. The pattern is incoherent and will decay, possibly unpredictably. The change tally might be correct, but its distribution is wrong. It's destructive, not constructive. Pillar 3: the rollback trigger. This is what we do when the gate says fail. We do not try to fix it live. We do not pour more intensity into the system. That is how you create a runaway resonance. You add to the destructive interference, making it worse. The moment the gate fails, a pre-programmed sequence initiates. 1. Containment. Phi firewalls. Active zones that pin the phase to a constant value. Activate around the experiment region, containing the incoherent pattern. 2. Damping. A gentle, broad-spectrum damping field floods the chamber, increasing the system's effective friction against change, draining the intensity from all oscillations, like applying a universal brake. 3. Isolation. The chamber is logically and physically disconnected from the network to prevent any propagating incoherence. 4. The system loads the verified restore point phi state, the known stable state from before the experiment, and forces the chamber back to it by applying the precise inverse pattern of changes. The entire sequence takes milliseconds. The goal is not to save the experiment, it's to save the foundry, the data, and the integrity of the surrounding reality. After rollback, the logs are reviewed. The falsifiability thread is triggered. Why did the coherence break? Was our model of the constraints wrong? Did we miscalculate the stability thresholds? Did we encounter an unlicensed resonance in the derivative spectrum? Only after answering that do we consider a new experiment. If coherence breaks, we stop. The tri-unity of safety. This doctrine lives in three echoes. Safety is not one-dimensional. The time echo of safety, rhythm and sequence. Our protocols have a tempo. The sequence is sacred. Calculate budget, compile program, verify restore point, actuate, measure gate, roll back if needed. You cannot measure the gate before you actuate. You cannot skip the restore point verification. The timing of the rollback trigger is also critical. Too slow and incoherent spreads. Too fast on a sensitive trigger and you abort perfectly good experiments. Safety has a rhythm, a chronology of checks that respects the causality built into the phi field's time derivatives. The space echo of safety, boundaries and containment. Where does the experiment end? The phi firewall is a spatial structure, a design gradient in the field that isolates phase. The license window defines a volume of parameter space. The incoherence from a failure has a shape. Does it leak like a gas, or propagate like a crack along a line of high spatial derivative? Our containment must match that spatial nature. We engineer with boundaries in mind, knowing that safety requires clear spatial separation between the experiment and the world. The motion echo of safety, flow, and the rest. What moves when things go wrong? Does incoherent change flow like a current through the field, seeking a path of least resistance? Does a defect get kicked into violent motion, plowing through the phase landscape? The rollback protocol must arrest not just the state, but the flows and momenta implicit in the field's derivatives. The damping field must oppose the direction of erratic motion encoded in the local omega and k. Safety manages dynamics, not just statics. A measurement scene, licensing a window. Let's see this in a real, if simplified, measurement scene. We are preparing to run a new type of wave in a water tank testbed, our mesoscopic simulator. What we measure? We are not measuring phi directly yet. We are measuring the background coherence metrics to establish our licensed window. We send a known simple probe wave, a single frequency, across the tank. We measure its decay rate. How quickly does the clean wave's phase coherence turn to choppy noise? This tells us the temporal stability threshold. We measure its scattering profile. How much does its wave vector k get randomized by tiny imperfections? This tells us the spatial coherence length. We measure the standing wave resonances of the tank itself. At what frequencies does the whole tank want to slosh in a coherent, high-intensity motion? The pass-fail rule for licensing. The decay is slow, high coherence time. Scattering is low, high coherence length. The resonances are well separated from our intended operating frequency. We can now define a licensed window. Operation permitted for waves with frequency between f1 and f2, amplitude below A, where A is below the threshold for turbulent breakdown, in the central region of the tank. This window, a bounded region in the space of omega, k, and intensity, is entered into the system. Any program must declare it will operate within this window. The decay is too fast, scattering is high, or a strong resonance sits right on our target frequency. We do not proceed. We must clean the tank, change the water, or damp the resonance first. We do not just run the experiment and hope. The failed measurement is the result. It tells us the medium's coherence budget for our intended type of change is currently 0. How errors are handled. If we try to run a program outside the licensed window, the compiler blocks it. If we somehow bypass that and run it, the coherence gate will almost certainly fail, triggering a rollback, which for a water tank might mean quickly lowering a wave-absorbing beach. The error teaches us our licensed window was correctly defined. The system worked. The universe filtered out the incoherent pattern. The prediction spine and falsifiability thread. This doctrine is falsifiable. It makes concrete predictions. As we operate further inside the licensed window, lower amplitude, farther from resonance boundaries, the probability of coherence gate failure will drop exponentially. The relationship between distance to window edge in parameter space and failure rate will be a smooth, predictable curve defined by the stability thresholds of the medium. This means safety is not magic. It's a measurable gradient in the landscape of possible changes. Falsifiability thread. If we consistently experience coherence failures well inside the licensed window, with all measurements verified, then our model of the coherence budget or the stability thresholds is wrong. The Coherence Selection Principle stands. The failures prove it, but our calculation of its limits is flawed. We must abandon that window definition and recalculate from more fundamental principles, perhaps discovering a new constraint or a previously unseen derivative interaction. The doctrine forces its own refinement. It is a scientific theory of safety. Your recognition skill from this part is this. When you look at any engineering plan, the first thing you ask is, what is its coherence budget, and what is the pass-fail gate? If those aren't defined, if there's no clear metric for constructive resonance versus destructive interference, the plan is not engineering, it's wishful thinking. It is an attempt to speak without listening to the grammar. The ethics of the doctrine. Operation, not poetry. In this control room, ethics is operational. It is the direct implementation of the coherence principle applied to complex, self-modeling patterns. Consent becomes integrity preservation. Before intervening on a coherent self-modeling fee pattern, a mind, an ecosystem, we must have a coherence budget for it, and a model predicting how our intervention will affect its core integrative metrics, its phase-locking values, its constraint residuals. If we cannot define that, we lack the ethical and physical license to proceed. We would be introducing unmodeled dissonance. Containment is a physical specification, as we've seen, the fee firewall. Reversibility is the rollback protocol to a verified stable state. Auditability is the logged ledger of every coherence gate result, every budget calculation, every rollback trigger. These logs are the HLS encoded truth of what we did and what the universe's filter said in response. Power without coherence is self-destruction. The universe enforces this through destructive resonance, through the cancellation of unaligned changes. Our ethics is simply the decision to listen to that enforcement before it becomes a catastrophe. It is the reactor operator respecting the conditions for a stable chain reaction, not because of a rule, but because they understand the physics of neutron multiplication, the constructive and destructive interference of nuclear changes. In our language, they understand the coherence budget of the core. If you want to see the full mathematical derivations and exact equations behind this idea, you can search for Holophase on Zenodo. There you will find the scientific papers that this audio journey is built on. The lanterns across scales. This doctrine is not just for giant foundries. It scales, because coherence is a universal filter. Near scale, the nanofoundry. In a quantum processor, the coherence budget is the decoherence time and the phase error threshold. The gate measures qubit fidelity. Are the superpositions, coherent superpositions of phase states, maintained? The rollback is a quantum reset and error correction cycle. Exceed the budget, and your computation turns to incoherent noise. The energy tallies here are minute, but the coherence limits are absolute. Think of the grid frequency, 60 Hz or 50 Hz, as a giant continent-wide phi oscillation. The coherence budget is the grid's inertia and the tolerance of generators to stay in phase. The gate is frequency stability. Deviations beyond a few hundred millihertz indicate a loss of phase lock across the network. A major power plant tripping offline is a massive, sudden coherence failure, a destructive interference in the scheduled flow of change. The rollback is automated load shedding and backup generators kicking in to restore the stable, synchronous frequency, the constructive resonance of the whole system. Far scale, planetary ecology. A stable climate is a coherent pattern of energy and material flows, a stable phase relationship between ocean currents, atmospheric waves, and solar input. The budget is tied to greenhouse gas concentrations because they alter the medium's response function, changing which patterns of change, climate modes, are stable. We are currently conducting an unlicensed, unbounded experiment by exceeding that budget. The coherence gate is the stability of jet streams, polar vortexes, and monsoon cycles. We are seeing the fail indicators, extreme events, shifting patterns, increased climatic noise. There is no quick rollback for a planet. The doctrine, understood late, shows us the terrifying cost of ignoring coherence limits at the grandest scale. The return to phi. All of this, the budget, the gate, the rollback, emerges from one field, phi, and its derivatives. The coherence metrics are measurements of relationships between these derivatives. The constraints that define the budget are relationships between these derivatives. The destructive resonance we fear is a specific mathematical relationship between derivatives going wrong, their phases arranged to cancel rather than build. We have added no new substances. We have simply taken the grammar of episode 9, the constraints and symmetries of phi, and turned it into the safety manual for episode 10. The universe's law is the same. We are just learning to obey it consciously, precisely, and proactively. The familiar tally called energy is merely our bookkeeping for the total intensity of these changes. The true limit is always the coherence of their arrangement. The closing. The calm after the protocol. So, we leave the control room. The screens are dark now. The experiment concluded safely. The core insight is this. Responsible power is the power to measure coherence, to define its limits from the grammar of phi, and to surrender to those limits without hesitation. The control room is not a place of fear, but of profound calm. The calm that comes from knowing the procedures are etched in the physics of the field itself, not just on paper. It is the calm of understanding the filter you must pass through. This part, the Global Safety Doctrine, is the root system of the master tree for episode 10. Every skill that grows from here, every act of programming, engineering, or building, depends on this root for stability. It depends on our previous understanding of the alphabet and the grammar, constraints. And it enables everything that comes next. It is the permission slip that allows us to even think about compiling a program, shaping a field, or designing a material, because we now know the guardrails are not man-made. They are universe-made, derived from the very nature of change. In our next part, we will finally leave the control room and walk onto the foundry floor itself. We will approach our first real machine, the Phi Foundry, and learn to classify these magnificent, delicate instruments that turn our coherent intentions into physical truth. We will learn what they can do, and more importantly, what they cannot, as defined by their own intrinsic coherence budgets. We have now internalized the non-negotiable law of engineering. Coherence is the currency, the gate, and the final judge. We have one field, phi, with its infinite derivatives, and we have learned that the stability of any story built from them depends entirely on the alignment of its echoes. The path to creation is now clear, because the boundaries, derived from the grammar, are unmistakable. Salam, and peace be upon you.